Hello and welcome to the 409th episode of CppCast, the first podcast for C++ developers by C++ developers. I'm your host, Jason Turner. Every fourth episode of C++ Weekly is a crossover episode for CppCast for those of you who are watching this on the C++ Weekly YouTube channel. You can choose to watch the podcast on YouTube or listen to it on your favorite service, and there have been questions. I'll just go ahead and clear those up right now. We're having a little bit of an issue coordinating the exact release times for both CppCast and the podcast services on the YouTube channel, and we're sorting that out. Hopefully it'll be sorted out soon. I hope. Anyhow, I'm joined by my co-host, Mathieu Robert. How are you doing, Mathieu?
Hey, I'm doing good. I had lots of travels over the past couple of weeks, and now I've been settled in the same place for a week. Which is crazy. I had conferences, I had client meeting, I had family trips. So now I've been in the same place for a week. I forgot how that feels. I guess compared to you, Jason, that's nothing. But
well, I've also been in the same place for a week now, and that's kind of weird because we had been traveling for a full month up to this point. Well, that's a story for a different time, I guess. But you and I did just see each other at ACCU on C.
Yep. Exactly. And after that, I had to take a flight to Finland for a client, and then I'm back in Stockholm.
Oh, we should talk about whether or not you would want to move to Finland. Let's bring in our guest. This week, we are joined by Mark Guidarelli. And Mark is kind to animals. He is a real-time embedded system software engineer, machinist, fabricator, cat servant, and pinball. I read that in a weird way. What was that supposed to say at the end of there, Mark?
And it's just pinball.
And pinball.
It's just pinball because that's a non-common thing.
It is definitely a non-common thing that we will spend some time chatting about here, I am quite sure. Would you move to Finland, Mark?
I would be interested in Scandinavia, yes. So I mentioned to you Sweden, and I love Sweden because they know how to make a great breakfast. Of all the countries I've ever been in, the breakfasts in Sweden were the most amazing.
I'm sorry, which country are you from? Because that's not possible.
Like,
there is good things about Sweden, but food is not one of them. And maybe it's a French bias, but
I like lutefisk and stuff, so that's.
Please no.
So what I've been doing recently is yesterday at my company, Stern Pinball, we released a 4th of July release for all 34 games that we've done recently. So me and my team were quite busy for the last couple of weeks. So
wow.
Yeah, we do that occasionally. I do an all-game release to catch everyone up on the platform. So games that are 12 years old will get a software update.
Just for the sake of our listeners, by the way, the reason I asked you if you had moved to Finland is because I had getting ads on Reddit telling me to move to Finland, basically. And that's, I thought it was humorous anyhow.
Honestly, Helsinki just feels like a slightly smaller Stockholm. They use euros, so that's a bonus for me because it's more like it makes more sense. Finnish is a bit impenetrable though. Swedish is not an easy language, but I think it's much more easier to understand. It's a Germanic language, so if you know English, it looks like a weird English with German to some degree. You can kind of guess some things. It's not like completely out of line. Finnish is just its own thing.
Finnish and Basque are on a different tree of the language.
It's just a small anecdote about language. It's not very important, but a guy I met there told me that in Sweden, in Finland, you can speak Swedish or Finnish. That's the two recognized languages. And funny enough, all the expats and immigrants who want Finnish nationality speak Swedish because you have to take one of those two to take the citizenship test. And everybody tells the new immigrants, do not pick Finnish. It's impossible to learn. Pick Swedish. It's much more easy to get the whatever level you need to pass the test and then get on with your life.
Huh. Oh, it's kind of funny, I guess, that you get the choice. I wonder what it's like when you move to Switzerland, if it matters which canton you're in. I should know the answer to this question. but I don't.
Perks of being an international podcast, we suddenly sometimes get interesting random question about what it's like to live in another country.
All right, we're going to cover a few news items. Code Dive 2026. So dates have been actually announced for this. Is that right?
Yes, it's gonna be the week before meeting C++, actually. So if you're interested in attending, speaking in both, you may have a shot, because it's like you have 1 week to spend you have the weekend to spend to visit Wroclaw, and then you can take a train to Berlin from Wroclaw. I think it's 2 or 3 hours, pretty scenic. And that's I've done it once. I know some people have done it more than once. When they align, it's actually nice. When conferences align, and you can just take a train between 2 European cities, I think it's a really nice experience.
Yeah, and Code Dive, it's a great town, but I don't know. One of my main motivations for going, honestly, is that they tend to have it right when the Christmas market opens. And I don't know if that'll be true. That should be true, actually, if it's going to be that.
Yeah, it's going to be
late
mid-November,
November.
like 18th or something.
Is the call for papers still open on that one?
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. Usually they send me an email to tell me it's open, but I think it is already open.
It is open, yeah. I will not be able to make either of those conferences, unfortunately, this year, but I'm hoping to go to all of the European conferences next year.
Do a big tour. They have changed venues, so I don't know what it's going to get, but in the past, and I think you've been there too, Jason, right? The really cool thing about Code Dive is that their venue is a cinema. So
yes,
if you get to speak, you get to speak in front of like 500 people in like an IMAX theater or something. It's not IMAX, but it's a big like room. I've never seen my slides so big before.
Yeah, yes. Big projector screen, and they tend to have a lot of attendees. It's just a single day conference, though.
Yes. It's free. Fun. If you happen to be in the area, or if you can make it to Wrocław, it's entirely free, unless they change the formula.
No, that should be right. It's all sponsored by Nokia each year. Okay, so the C++ documentary has been released, although I don't know if it's publicly available yet. Are they doing screenings of this?
I believe it's on YouTube.
I watched it on YouTube. It was quite entertaining.
Oh, okay. Oh, very good. I missed that. I knew that they had done a private pre-screening like a month ago in Chicago or something. I didn't realize that it had been completely public now.
What did you think of it, Mark? You said it was funny or entertaining?
No, not funny. It was interesting. I mean, I lived through almost all of it, so it was very familiar, and it was a retelling of history that I knew. But it was fun to see the actual people saying the actual stories that I had heard or read about. So it was informative, and documentaries are one of the major things I consume, so I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I should definitely check it out.
I should watch it as well. And on some sad news here, Gor Nishanov, who is the author of the coroutines that actually got accepted in C++ 20, if you recall, there were several different competing proposals for coroutines. Gor actually passed away very recently here. At the time of the airing of this, it will have been a few weeks ago now.
Yeah, it's sad news. I don't know if I ever met him, but the work on coroutines is certainly something.
Right.
Herb put up a memorial page to him and had some really kind things to say about him. We'll link to that for the episode.
Yeah, that's the one I read. I liked it too.
It was interesting stories from Herb, like things that I did not know. I have met Gor. I believe I interviewed him on CppCast a very long time ago. And Herb said that during that proposal period for coroutines, that Gor was actually helping all of the competing proposals to become as good as they could be as well, so that the best one would win.
That's interesting. Oh yes, for people who want to go back in history, that was episode 110, 2017. Oh wow, that's even before I started listening.
It was, yes. Well, that's, yes. Now we're getting to personal ancient history at this point. The CPP quiz link that you put in here for Boolean short circuit ordering.
Yes, I like the idea. And then I tried the quiz, and I think after 2 questions, it went on like, do you know all the atomic sequence flag by heart, yes or no? And then I gave up because it was like, and I don't know if it's random which question you get in which order, but I kind of felt there was like a gap, like I would say like a canyon between the levels of some questions. I think it's a really interesting concept, to like, oh, what is your intuition as a programmer of like which is faster? I don't think it should maybe go for like that tricky. Like, do you know the atomic difference, like the difference between the atoms, like sequence acquire, sequence release, and whatever is the other ones? That's the kind of thing that will get you a talk for like advanced people at a conference. But I think for the basic things like, hey, which of those two loops is faster? What happens if you do this or that? Like, I think it's a very good idea, and I think that would be very good for like people who get into C++ or just want a refresher on like, hey, are you aware of like what's faster than what? I think maybe like just a better data set would make the concept go a long way, in my opinion. I don't know if you tried the quiz yourself.
I tried the first three, and they were the first one. I was immediately on guard because I'm like, this is so obvious. There must be a trick, but it wasn't. So then, once I got over that paralysis, I did the first three, and they were increasing difficulty but fair. I didn't get to one about atomic, so I'm not sure if I didn't go to number 4 when that happened. I got the first 3 right and said, wow, this is cool. I'll do it later. And then I forgot to follow through on it. But it was, I thought it had value, and it's something I would use to talk to some of the younger engineers I mentor to walk them through some of the thinking process. So I thought it had value.
Yeah. I suspect it's just that the questions are random, and I got like an interesting draw. Or
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
I
actually,
just
like-
should know my atomics better. Maybe I just should know my atomics better, but
I would not say I know atomics off the top of my head. I have to run to CPP reference when I start playing with them to choose between the flavors.
I actually, I agree though. That first question about, which of these is faster made me stop for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm pretty sure I want a short circuit on the first
This is a
element.
trap.
But then I started to wonder, second guess myself, like, well, what if it's very rare that the first one short circuits? Maybe then it would actually be better for the branch predictor if I did put the expensive one first, right? Like, I don't know. It's like,
oh, that's the article I forgot to mention that I should have mentioned. Speaking of branch prediction, have you seen the GCC news? I think it's from a couple of weeks ago now. Some guy tweaked the branch prediction heuristics in GCC and made every test program run 10% faster on like x86. And it's a one-line changes that changes what is the number from like 3 to 10 before you consider that a branch prediction is actually like more expensive. I need to find the thing to not stop talking out of my ass and get you the actual like data, because it's a one-line fix.
The headline about
Yeah, I'll
that.
do a quick edit.
Read the paragraph, and then when it's always saying it's against a known test suite, I get skeptical sometimes.
yeah, although, I mean, I would agree with you, but on the other hand, GCC's test suite is absolutely ginormous. And if they can manage to make all of their tests run faster.
If it's the GCC one as opposed to another curated one where someone's trying to win.
Right.
There's a cost that they do some math to figure out what's the cost of making a branch mesh prediction.
Yes.
And he changed the number from 2 to 5 by doing +3 on the math. And they report 12% faster on both Intel and AMD,
So,
just by saying, "Hey, optimizer, this is the penalty if you guess that wrong."
Right.
And apparently, it makes the code generates differently and be like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm not gonna risk it anymore."
I wonder if that's something you can tweak anyhow, because a lot of those thresholds, well, at least with Clang, you can tweak some of the like inlining thresholds and stuff. I wonder if you can.
So you feed it through a gprof loop where you train it on your actual program and a representative data set.
Yeah, there's a caveat that this is for the There's a caveat that's for the generic, like not the architecture tuned version. If you target if you do March native and you compile for your own computer, it will probably do some math that is maybe better. But for the generic case, they kind of figured out that for the average computer now, the pipeline being deeper, they should increase the penalty of mispredicting a branch when they figure out how the optimizer make a decision.
That makes sense.
But it was a funny I tweaked the number by adding. Sorry, I changed the 2 into a 5, and now suddenly it's 12% faster on the average computer.
All right. Let's get to the interview going, I believe, if there's no other news items. Thank you for joining us, Mark, by the way. I don't know if I feel like I did a proper introduction here since I got stuck halfway through well, not halfway through your bio. Your bio is very short and succinct, and people tend to give us larger bios, so I didn't know what to do. But I know that you have actually had a pretty long career in C++. You just commented that watching the C++ documentary was like watching a replay of your career, basically. So, like, I don't know. You want to start here? Do you just want to give us like an overview, since there's that teaser there? Like, when did you start with C++?
Oh boy. A coworker of mine bought Seafront 2.0 the fall of whenever it came out. What was that? 80 something, 89? When Seafront 2.0 came out. And also we were using Zortex C++ very early on. So we, another engineer and I were working on a fascinating project. I've been very lucky to work on a lot of interesting projects throughout my career. This one was interesting. We worked for a company that made software for the movie industry, things for budgeting films, scheduling films, doing script writing, formatting. They were all written on the Macintosh. They wanted to get into that PC market that was much bigger. So what's the natural thing you do? Me and another engineer took Inside Mac volume 1 through 4, opened it up, read it, and wrote a software library that implemented the Macintosh library as it was documented, made it a linkable library, and you can now run your Mac program on a PC with overlapping windows before Microsoft Windows existed.
Wow.
It was really a fascinating project. And we're talking, this is back in the day of CGA and Hercules graphics cards. So really early on, it was a fascinating project. So we tried to write good code, and we were really jealous of not having function prototypes because this is the days of KNRC.
Oh.
So what do? We buy Cfront purely to get function prototypes really out of it. We didn't really use a lot of the C++ language because we still had to work with Watcom C and a lot of the other C compilers. But we wanted Cfront to have a better C and used some features as it was convenient. So
Wow.
we started out really early with C++ in those days. Zortex, C++, the early Cfront, and then as the language started to get more and more mature, hopped on to other compilers and kind of rode the wave of all the compiler technology. Also, that engineer and I also, back in like 89, bought Sun 350s, the diskless Sun 3s. I had a friend that worked for Sun, and we were able to get these workstations really inexpensive and, upgrade the memory through a hard drive on it, and had a Sun 3. So I was starting to work with SunView and all of the C and C++ and rode the wave of GCC. And kind of hopping to one of your things, what was a seminal moment in GCC or in C++ for me was GCC 1.37.1. That version was one of the best early versions of GCC with G++ that was really solid on a 68K and other processors. Actually, I think 6020 maybe it was on the Sun 3. So we were in on it really early.
And you were using Cfront and Zortex, you said, on a Mac and on DOS?
No, not on a Mac. No. On a Mac, early bad days of C programming, Aztec C from Manx on a Mac in 1984 or 5 was a painful time to be working in C. No, Zortex was on a PC, and Cfront was actually, we had a 386 PC running System 5. We were running System 5 Unix to have Cfront on it to do all our development, and the final product was shipped on Watcom with the Farlap DOS extender, if anyone ever remembers those bad old days, to make the product.
Wow.
Oh, goodness.
It's kind of crazy to me how some companies, some projects were like really interested in the whole idea of like stronger typing from C++ back in like late 80s. I went to school in the early 2000s,
Right.
and still everything was C. And even if we were taught C++, like the default was still, if you want to make a systems program, you're just gonna do C. Maybe it's influenced by the fact that a lot of like GNU and Linux and other like things were all C, and I mean still are to this day. But it's kind of like it feels like it was 20 years, like well, 15 years they happened, but only for like specific projects or industry.
I think there was, for the longest time, and there still is in the games industry and other areas, suspicion of C++. What I don't see, a constructor does this, a destructor does that. The fear of an expense that I can't see, and of course with Compiler Explorer now you can really see that it's pay as you go. But there are still a lot of people that are naturally suspicious of what happens behind the scenes on C++ because they haven't chosen to learn about the costs, whether hidden or not. I hopped on C++ very early to be a better C. I got better warnings out of it. I got better code out of it. I got better type safety. For me, a lot of what I do is I write it all in C++, and I use classes for data encapsulation. But do I inherit? Not that often. Do I do multiple inherits? I've never done it in my life. Those are things I avoid. But, Jason, I've shared with you my warnings list of, I have like 43 different warnings on GCC, no implicit conversions. I will I will do a static cast up and down just because I want to know what's going on. I control the size of the data. I want no implicit conversions ever. And that's a choice that I live by. So I started with C++ to get a better type safe C, to be able to get better warnings, and grew into the features as they happen. Namespaces, things like that are just wonderful kind of gifts to me as a systems programmer for me to be writing better, safer code.
Yeah, no, that
Yeah.
resonates a lot with me. I think there was, and I think this is clearly not the first time, like on this podcast or us or anywhere else someone has said this, but I think there was a lot of harm done by people teaching C++ as like now you can do C like Java, because
Mhm.
that's what I was taught in school. The first time I was given C++, I immediately started writing a class hierarchy because that's cool. We have OOP now, and maybe when you get it from C as just like, hey, this is an improvement over what we can already do, and maybe you already. I don't know how long you had been already programming back then. Like I guess you had more like experience already to be like, oh, I see the limitations of like KNRC and the lack of the type system, and oh, those things make sense, and that's why I want them. I suspect this is the main issue. Like people, I can't use C++. You're gonna have virtual everywhere. I'm like, well, I mean, only if you want to. You don't have to.
Right. I had been programming professionally for at least 5 years at that point, Fortran, even on punch cards and things like that before that. One thing you touched on, class library, things like that, another seminal moment in C++ was National Institute of Health's class library versus STL. I don't know if you've ever seen the NIH class library.
I
That
have
was
not.
the thing that was available before STL. I forgot the gentleman's name that wrote it, but it was basically the entire Smalltalk class structure written in C++. It was a very fateful implementation of that, but by modern standards, I would say, boy, that you're biting. To do one bite, you take the whole apple, right? Because it's kind of like Objective C, where you have a base object and everything has to descend from it, and it kind of goes into madness from there as far as complexity and cost. You take a bite of the entire apple when you go into that, and that's another kind of jumping forward in your seminal moments for C++, the war or battle of NIH versus STL. Similarly, C++ versus Objective C. In
Mhm.
Southern California, where I was amongst the defense contracting companies, and I worked for General Dynamics for a number of years, there was an internal battle. Are we going C++? Are we going Objective C? And there was advocates very, pushing their point of view on each. And for a long time, Objective C was kind of winning. So,
And
and then I forgot at what point. I think it was the STL. I think it was 89 that just wiped out kind of Objective-C and the industries that I was working in at that point. Apple, of
Yeah,
course, held on to it forever.
yeah. I was gonna say, sadly, sadly, the people who knew who knew Objective C all managed to find their way into Apple, and now every time I have to do something on Mac, I have to deal with those .mm files that drive me nuts.
Right.
And it is still the default. Like I am kind of losing my mind every time you're like, oh, you want to do system programmings with Mac. It's still like the base library, everything that they have not ripped off of like a BSD. It's or Linux. It's just like I do graphics programming. I had to deal with Metal recently, and yeah, it's all like Objective C.
And it's kind of curious. I'm not going to claim to know a lot about Swift, but I did read the initial papers that they chose to stay with the Objective-C runtime model, which I'm not sure if that's the strongest feature of that language, but now Swift inherits that, and that's still the runtime model for everything.
Well, Objective-C is what was chosen for Next, and it became part of the Apple core system
Correct.
after Steve Jobs was reacquired. Yeah.
And the Next was wonderful. I was a Next developer for a number of years. It was a wonderful machine. So
That's cool. I've definitely never programmed for Next. I feel like I read some docs at some point forever ago. Did you ever have a BOS machine by any chance, Mark, since you're talking about
no, I
esoteric
never
things?
did, but I did admire the file system on BOS was very nicely done. I've had the opportunity to write a real file system before, and there was a very good book. The person who wrote the BOS file system wrote that taught me everything I needed to know to be able to actually write a file system.
That's cool. Do you happen to remember who that was? What book that was?
I will send it to you offline. It's not in my memory bank at the moment, but I'll find it.
That's fine. I just remember BOS was, B and Next were things that were in my consciousness as an early university student, but things that I couldn't afford to access, basically.
Right.
I thought BOS ran on like x86, but am I confusing that with something else?
It did in its second
Next
generation.
was, yeah, sorry to interrupt. Next, the final gasp of Next Step, they had an x86 version. For some reason, BOS sounds like 6830 or something. I can't quite remember.
I think they were a dual core PowerPC architecture initially.
Okay.
And then when they knew they weren't making money by requiring people to buy their B boxes, then they ported to x86.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And it lives on as Haiku today, basically.
Right.
Oh, okay. I think when I was in like tech school, you always have like a guy or two that is like really into weird distributions. They're willing to introduce you to something exotic. And I had a guy who had a BOS. I think the one thing he demonstrated is that with the cheapest sound card on the market, you could still open it and play like 20 million MP3 at the same time, and it would somehow work. While Windows will immediately explode if you try to play two WAV files in parallel at the time. So that was, I remember a thing that impressed me, like, wow, they can have audio drivers and they can mix sound, and it just works.
Sorry, flashbacks from the first time I tried to play an MP3 on my Linux system back in 1995. My computer was exactly fast. I had to do a 5-minute pre-buffer for the MP3 decoding. It had to decode the entire MP3 before I could actually start playing it. Otherwise, it would hit up against the buffer. Anyhow, Mark, I'm curious, and in your history of using C++, did you, like, in those early days, I'm kind of surprised that you didn't like run into like, compiler bugs and stuff that would have just put you off the language.
So Seafront was actually amazingly, again, we weren't using it very stressfully. Seafront never gave me any fits that I remember. Zortex C++, Walter Bright wrote that. He was very upfront. It had a README that came with it and said what works and what doesn't. He was very upfront saying, these features are solid. Be aware some of these are a little sketchy. Here's corner cases, a pointer to a virtual function, things like that might not be so solid. So he was very upfront about it. And as I recall, did lots of updates. I never had fits with it. What I had fits with was Watcom was buggy. Farlap DOS extenders were buggy. Aztec C was buggy. all these early compilers were just really not very robust. So, but Seafront and Zortec, for the way we use them, they worked very well, very well.
For our younger listeners here, how would you find out that Zortec had an update, and how would you acquire the update?
That is a great question. I think Byte Magazine or Creative Computing, I would see the ads and I would probably either mail or phone call and order it. This is, things like this were, yeah, there was no instantaneous, there's no way to know about it. You would see an ad in Byte Magazine and go, holy moly, Zortec's up to 1.3. I better call and order it.
That's awesome. I half expected you to say that they had a BBS that you could sometimes download patches from, but
BBS is, oh man, when did we start really touching BBSs? Okay, I remember doing that personally, but not for commercial software. Yeah, I don't remember downloading patches or anything like that. I was always snail mail buying something.
Mail you a floppy back.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, I guess is that a commercial software? Because I assume if it's a commercial software and you're a client, maybe they will extend like a courtesy of either directly mailing you the update or at least giving a call to someone, which I assume can absolutely get lost because it's so easy for a phone call to get lost. But
back then you either didn't get the call or you had an answering machine. But yeah, that would be another thing is a flyer in the mail, like a postcard, saying, hey, buy the upgrade.
Right, because they would sell the upgrades at the time. They would not send them for free.
Right.
I remember going to a computer store to buy my DOS 6.22 upgrade floppy, because that one was just a single floppy disk, and it cost like $10, but Microsoft was not going to give that away.
Right.
Anyhow.
But also these updates didn't happen very often. So it would be, let's say, 6 months. So it would be, it's not like the patch of the day club and getting something like that.
Oh yeah, no, it's an absolutely different distribution model. Well, obviously, I still remember back when we had to buy mostly for video games. You would get you would get the thing. They started already when I was playing video games in the late 90s to get like updates that you would get by like buying video games magazines, because usually they would come with a CD, and the CD would have a bunch of patches for the recent version of the game, some shareware, maybe like a demo or something like that. But yeah, that was already like in motion. You could already send patches to some measure, but it's interesting how the economy of software has completely changed. And I'm not saying like just how you sell it, but like the economy of how you run it, you patch it. Going back to that, does that mean that, because it's a discussion that keeps going back and forth, especially like people love that in the video game industry, like the fact that back in the day when you release software, you could not just release on the fact that, if there's an issue, it's fine, we'll just fix it tomorrow, or we'll have a day zero patch or whatever. Like you had to ship something and it had to work.
I was around for the cartridge era, and I was around for launching, did games on the Nintendo 64, launch titles for PlayStation 1. That's one and done. You're going to manufacture, you're making millions of units. You have exhaustive in-house testing, and then you have to go through Sony or Nintendo's QA testing. So there was a lot of rigor to that to make sure it was correct before it went out.
And I assume it was the same for industrial software, right? The thing you would get on a CD or on a...
Yeah.
The thing that always surprises me is we keep talking as a, CI, CD, unit test as kind of like a new thing, like something that the old guard needs to get in line with. But paradoxically, they were the generation that could less afford to have bugs found in production than the current one. So it's always like bugged me that we seem to be more rigorous on unit testing now that we can actually afford to have a bug slip because we can fix it on the day. Well, back in the day, you had none of that, and you had to make sure it worked.
So here's kind of funny things is at many companies I worked at, the CIs would be called a merge day. And you would stop work, and everyone would be walking from desk to desk with a floppy, giving their version of the code to the other version to meld them together. The one engineer and I used revision control system, RCS, on that one project. That was the first time I started using revision control in like 88, 89. And that was a little bit unheard of in a lot of companies. So I was at major companies doing, video game development for the arcade. And we would walk, with floppy drives from desk to desk and spend all day resolving, gosh awful merge conflicts and, standing it up. And then one person's PC would be the source of truth. And everyone would gather around negotiating how the conflict gets resolved because no one wants to have their code be the one that's getting butchered. So it was a different era. It was the bad old days. There's nothing good about that. That was the bad old days, and we've learned better. But to your point, we had limited resources, limited, machines, limited technology, but we had some of the most hard constraints because, like in the arcade, we would be burning EEPROMs or even worse, masked ROMs. You have to commit this and burned once ROMs that, if you mess up, you have to flush all that inventory and no one's going to be very happy about that. So we would have a combination of masked ROMs and then EEPROMs and do weird patches around the masked ROM if you found an error. It was not for the faint of heart.
So you shipped cartridges for N64, like games you worked on?
Yeah.
Did I hear you right? I did not know that. What?
Mortal Kombat.
I mean, for the sake of our
trilogy.
listeners, Mark and I have known each other for a little while here, so that's why I'm more surprised.
Mortal Kombat Trilogy was the big one on Nintendo 64. That was a fun project. And then Mortal Kombat 3 on the PlayStation 1. And then I helped doing some tools support on Doom and Final Doom for the PlayStation 1 and some other titles.
Oh, nice.
Dabbled with those. One other, I hate to harp on the bad old days, multiple companies I worked at, for example, I worked at VersaCAD back in the day before we got crushed by Autodesk. We would have an engineer whose sole job was to write the installers. So back in the days, you would have someone whose sole job would be making the install program for the PC to be able to unpack, the multi-stack of floppies and put in all the, TSRs that no one knows about these days and stuff like that to make a program actually be able to be distributable.
Oh yeah, and then some guy had to make the thing to help you configure your sound card.
Right.
What is your IRQ? What is your mapping address?
DMA. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I remember those.
My professional life starts after SourceSafe and installers were available. We did not have to hand roll those things.
Yeah. Well, lots of war stories of shipping software in the early 80s for the early computers. There was a lot of infrastructure that didn't exist that you had to create, and everyone was creating it uniquely.
I am still curious. What do you think about the evolution of C++ in all these years?
I love it. It's gotten better and better. We stagnated horribly between 89 and 2011. It was a dying language. I had to deal with all of the Java people that were saying that that's the next great thing, and they were on a positive trajectory, and C++ was on a flat line dipping down trajectory. So it was a very sad time. But C++ 11 really kind of shot it in the arm and created it. So some of my notes of the seminal things for C++, since you gave me some things to think about, I already touched on a couple of them. The C++ versus Objective-C, the National Institute of Health class library versus STL. All of these were just foundational C++ finding its way. GCC 1.37.1 was a very important point for me. It was on several processors reliably, and it worked. C++ 11 was obviously added so much. It fixed a lot of issues. It gave, honestly, to me, new hope that it's an alive language and we're in a good direction. Then the C++ committee setting kind of the cadence that we're going to do this every 3 years. We're going to start thinking about this were open to getting papers. There was a lot of energy. You have Clang starting to happen with LLVM. There's so many wonderful things. And we've marched forward on that. 11 was a big one. 14, 17, for me, less significant. 14 felt like the things we missed. 17 had some nice items. 20 started to get some things. And the things that are important to me probably aren't important to a lot of the world, but little things like source location and stack trace are so important to me. They, as a systems programmer, they made my life so much better. And then some of the syntactic sugar and stuff like that, structured bindings, things like that are just wonderful things to be able to write more expressive and clean code, things like that. So,
and these are all things that you're using in embedded development on your pinballs.
Absolutely. Subject to the hardware I have with the libraries and compiler that I can get on it. Because on certain things like Pinball Platform, I have one platform, we call it Spike 2, that we shipped 9-10 years ago. That kernel and compiler are kind of stuck in time because the cost value risk of moving that up doesn't buy me enough versus I've shipped hundreds of thousands of titles on that known kernel and compiler. I'm hesitant to move it on that platform because it is ancient, obsolete hardware. A couple of years ago, last year or something like that, I launched Spike 3, which is much more modern kernel, modern compiler. Life is a lot better, so I can use features on that. But I have a common code base, so that adds more complexity as well to be able to pick and choose. But on the day job, 2014 is about the level I can support on both platforms.
Okay. And you're doing bare metal development?
I'm sorry?
Bare metal development? Do you have any operating system?
Okay, I do bare metal development, and that's when I do bare metal on the pinball machine, I have 32K of 32K of flash and like 4 and 8K of RAM. It's in C. I write my own CRT0. I don't have a standard library. I have to hand roll or cherry pick the GCC library routines. It's like, I guess I do need shifting by a 32-bit in this library. So it is a very curated experience on that. It is lean and mean, but it's true real time. I have an event loop that has to execute every 12/80th of a second.
And that's all in C++ as well?
No, that's in C. There's no way. It's such an ancient processor. I can't tolerate the bloat that you might get of it trying to be more efficient and therefore increase code size. Even I have to freeze in time a version of GCC because I've had GCC go versions and suddenly the 68, not that these are 68K, but one product I was on, 68K, suddenly the 68K code generator just got terrible. Someone made a choice and didn't think about it, and suddenly code was twice as big. And I had to regress back to the previous version of the compiler because it's a dead processor. No one mainline cares about it anymore.
Right, and if you do OS, it's not going to help you that much, I suspect.
Right.
Yeah,
yes,
I mean, just as an aside rant, they both have OS and OZ now, which OZ is supposed to be even smaller than OS. And I think every single time I have tried, OZ has produced a larger binary than OS. I do not understand why that flag exists. But
yeah, I think I did that test as well. I use OS. I don't remember having any success with OZ.
Yeah. I tell students when it comes up, this means try even more harder to make it smaller. And anyhow.
And one of my favorite hidden flags that I think I mentioned to you, Jason, is make the dump of all the stack sizes at compile time. You know that is, and that's another one I live and die by is on my compiler line. I set my stack limit to 16K. So, and of course, I'm W error. So if I get more than a 16K stack, it's going to abort the build.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I did an episode about that after you told me about it at some point.
Yeah, and
That's
it
cool.
does a great job.
Is that per function or?
It is per function, and in my day job on the pinball machine, we used to limit. We do a cooperative multitasker, and we used to limit the stack frame in some cases down to hundreds of bytes, but we relaxed it up to 4K.
Right, because you have to suspend and then come back. So yeah, okay, makes
Yeah,
sense.
and we have in a pinball machine, we have, I don't know, 40, 60, 96 processes at any given time. And they're all small and bite sized, and they can be as trivial as a process that wakes up, turns a light on, sleeps for n ticks. A tick for me is 16 milliseconds, and then wakes back up and turns it back on, back off, back on, back off, because they're so cheap. And sometimes that's the easiest way to do it. And fun bit of history, why do we do 16 milliseconds? Because we're back from the old days of the refresh rate of a NTSC monitor, 60 frames a second.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I work in video games, so obviously 16 milliseconds is not a random number at all to me. It's your target 60 FPS. Why 60 FPS? Especially because I'm in Europe, right? And the first question you ask is why is it not 50 FPS? Because PAL monitors are 50 FPS, but no, I think now every monitor is 60 and targeting 60 or
Yeah.
120.
All right, Battle Days story, porting Mortal Kombat after you do the US version to the PAL version and making all of the logic and physics still work right. Not pleasant.
Yeah, I have a coworker who likes retro consoles, and he's trying to get something to run on an old, I think it's Apple. But the problem is he's trying to go by the like biggest library you can find for it, which is all based on the American version. And because of the refresh rates, he has the same issue. He's been trying to look up a board on eBay for a while now, and he says I keep finding like European conversions or just European imports, and they have been converted already to 60 to 50 to 50 hertz, and that completely breaks all the code he's trying to write because he's still like targeting the old like NTSC monitors because that's kind of all the things you can find online.
Right, right.
And this hardware is harder to come by in Europe.
And the hardware is dying. You got to replace the capacitors. You got to do all sorts of things to bring these things back to life.
Yeah, when you're watching a retro video and someone's like, I'm just going to plug this thing in, you're like, no. Anyhow.
I want to give a shout out, Jason, though. The other thing that's exciting me in C++ today, and I hope someone funds them, is Khalil's exception handling. I am all in on exception.
Oh, yeah.
And I love the work he's doing, and I hope it gets mainstreamed and some of the efficiencies he's talking about into Clang and GCC. I'm a big, I use exceptions, and a lot of times I'm only throwing an int, and I really want that to be less expensive. Right now, it's way too expensive just to throw an int. Because, for example, in my multi-process and cooperative multitasking system, when you kill, I since it can be a C++ object, it has to get an exception thrown to it. So there's like a wrapping thunk that will trigger the exceptions to do RAII cleanup on everything. So, and I only need an int for that to know why I died.
So I just made a note so that I'll try to remember to link to that for our listeners, to Khalil Estell's exception handling work that he's been doing for improving exception handling, specifically targeting ARM.
Yes, but I think it also works for 86 because I think it's if I recall correctly, it also works for like x86 System 5, like the 64-bit API basically.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the same concept of structured exceptions and whatnot.
A lot of the work he's done is the framework for Clang and GCC have a lot of methodologies that then are back-ended to each one of the processors, but showing how you can override the allocation of the frame for propagating the exception and things like that. So I really hope someone with some funding helps fund him at some point to get that mainstreamed, because that will help all of us.
That would be great.
Has he you written something new since the last presentation I saw, which must have been ACCU of last year?
No, there has not been any new presentations since then.
Okay.
We've been going for a bit here, but I want to absolutely make sure that you tell us about the programming language you've been working on, since that's been your main project lately.
So I'm a firm believer in you always have to have a passion project that's not your day job, because that's a project where you take risks. That's where you learn. That's where you advance yourself as a software engineer, because if you're not learning, you're rusting away, my humble opinion. So my day job, I work with C++14. I work on certain hardware platforms. I work in certain frameworks, things like that. And I was looking through my list of projects I've done in the past and on my own that may or may not have been finished. And way back in 89, 90, I wrote a PostScript interpreter, the language, because I really liked that language and I wanted to use it as a scripting language in video games. I thought it would be perfect for the shell of a video game. This is before Lua. Lua didn't exist yet. And there's certain aspects of that language that are very interesting if you haven't ever programmed in PostScript or understand it. It's very memory conservative. The entire program never exists in memory. It's as if it's a stream, a paper tape coming in of text or binary that gets consumed into building a PostScript object. And you only need one of those, and then you activate on that object, and then you do the next one and the next one. So the entire source of the program is never in memory. You'll get byproducts of the objects that are created from the PostScript text, and then you can do interesting things with it. So I thought about that, and I said, yeah, I should take another swing at that. So about 4.5, 5 years ago, I started from scratch, and then I got a little bit of a way, and I said, boy, PostScript is, it's got implicit conversions, it's got this, that, and the other. It's like, I don't like that anymore. So I sat down and rethought about it and came up with a couple of things that I wanted. And a lot of them are from my holistic 40 whatever years of programming, the things I liked from different parts of the world. I love Prolog. I did some programs in Prolog in the defense industry. I played with Smalltalk, and there was aspects of that I liked. There was all these functional languages and things like that. So I started to imagine a scripting language that would encapsulate all the cherry-picked ideas I liked from different things. From Smalltalk, one of the things I liked is you can save a snapshot to disk and then restore later as if nothing ever happened. So I made a new, what I would say is the bones of what PostScript was about, but totally different. There's some elements of it that I built upon, but it's a type-safe language. It's a memory type-safe language. It has transactional bump allocation as well as a zone that's garbage collected, free store. I needed that. I'm a person that I've never done a garbage collector before until I wrote this, and now I understand them and I appreciate them. And I did a very deep dive on that and really optimized the heck out of it. But I needed a garbage collector for my Prolog. I wanted to be able to do backtracking and things like that and be able to do it in a small memory footprint. So what I would say is there's a million things this language does, and I'm selling it short. Go to the GitHub and take a look at it. It's 100% there. Oh, there was other things I wanted to challenge myself with. It's a single header. It's 90,000 lines of C++ code.
No.
No, it's one header that you include, and it includes 68 files. Come on, I'm not going to put it all in one file. But it is, you have no build system dependency. Because I'm a header that's writing on anyone's code, I have 45 different warnings and stuff like that. So I compile clean no matter, I can't imagine someone being more pathological about the warnings than what I tried. I did everything possible. But you include the tricks.h header, and then in your C program, C++ program, you instantiate a tricks object. And now you have an entire VM, and it's highly tunable. You have a whole block of parameters. How much memory is its VM space? Do you want to hand it a block and say how big it is? Do you want it to malloc its block? That is the only malloc it'll ever do, is that one malloc.
Nice.
Stacks, everything else, every possible parameter can be tuned on it. I can instantiate that tricks object. I can instantiate 10 of them if I wanted them in one program, and it is a compute engine. You can pass a script to it to have it execute. You could have it execute the script and then stay resident and get information from a pipe and get data back out. It can be a compute engine that's sitting there all the time. One of the choices I did was it is type safe, but it also exposes everything about IEEE 754. So, and it has a REMPL mode. You can interactively just do programming in on as well. And then you could snapshot and save everything you did and restore it later. But the IEEE 754, every C++ supported standard library math function is there for 32-bit, 64-bit, including all the rounding modes, all the environment modes. So one of the things I also wanted it for is it's a rapid prototype for doing formulas in floating point. Instead of doing a edit, compile, execute cycle in C++, you could, sort of do a MATLAB type, expressions and prototype rapidly on an interactive command line, commit your algorithm or your concept, and then write it in, a real language, right? I tried to make the scripting language as efficient as possible. The scanner is very efficient. It does one character look ahead. It only has to push back the character in one spot. The interpreter executes about 47 million opcodes a second on my M2 Mac laptop under Parallels, so it's losing a little bit of performance there. Very rich. Other things I wanted to do, because the environment I work in, coin op industry, I'm not going to say we have the best practices on everything, because Jason, you always bust me like you wrote a test suite for that bug you found. It's like, well, no. So one of the things I did here is it's libbed fuzz and it'll stand up. I've run it for 24 hours on the scanner and the interpreter without it finding a problem. But I also have about 24,000 regression test suite now to run through on it, on every major feature, every component. It's not at 1.0 yet, just because I want other eyes on the ABI before I settle it down. I've got all of one person who's forked it. So, hopefully someone else will find this interesting. It's not for everything. It's a concatenative language. That turns everyone off immediately. Unless you like Forth or PostScript, it's going to be alien speak. But some of the things I did to try and soften that is you can do infix mathematics. You can go into, and it's all scanner syntactic sugar. You do a $ and a parentheses, and then everything in there could be, a times 5 plus 12 divided by 3. And the scanner is going to turn that into postfix, shove it into a thing. And as it digests objects, it's now going to get them postfix. So it doesn't know any difference. Zero cost.
Yep.
It's also, the language has got the philosophy of zero cost. If you don't want to use a feature, it's not going to cost you anything. But it also, here's something that's kind of unique in a small memory footprint kind of scripting language. It does the full Erlang OTP actor supervisor model, cooperative multitasking. It's got Prolog backtracking engine. It's got reactive cells where you can link cells together like a spreadsheet and they'll fire.
Oh, wow.
And all these are pay as you go. There's no cost to them. I think at the end of the day, personally satisfying. I got to explore C++23, got to learn garbage collection, how to actually implement a very efficient garbage collector. I think there's a lot of things in the code base. Like I said, it's not small. It's 90,000 lines. I'd like to think it's well written. It's got a lot of things as a teaching tool for someone who wants to understand how to do things, as far as like basic compiler, memory systems, things like that. It's also, because I'm a bit miser, it is very thrifty on its memory. It can run in a very small memory footprint. Architectural choices that were made up front to make it trivial, zero expense to do a snapshot. There's no pointers. Everything's a base offset, like the bad old days of Windows or DOS, where you had a base address and an offset. Now you can freeze at any time without any concern. So it's go look at the page. There's also a rich set of showcase applications demoing different parts of the technology. Two of them that I put a lot of effort in. One is a full Z machine for the Infocom games to be able to play any Infocom game written in the Trix scripting language for the whole interpreter. And then another one I had a lot of fun with is a pretty much state-of-the-art maze generator. Just about anything I could think about to do to a 2D maze generator it supports. So if you go to the README page for the GitHub, you'll see like 4 pretty pictures of some mazes the program generates. And those programs, like the maze generator, I think is like 9,000 lines of Trix script. So it's not a trivial program. There's a lot to it.
So it's a postfix stack-based language, right?
Yes, concatenative language that can be embedded into a C++ program as a compute engine.
Now, what does the interop look like? How easy or hard is it to expose a C function to it or to get data back in and
Trivial. You can add new operators to it, and there's a couple of the example programs. Like I have a Tetris written in it that runs, but if you want to do the AI playing Tetris, that math is a little heavy to do it real time. So those operators are written in C++ and exposed to the script to be able to run. Recently, I added a full visibility the other way, a full 32-bit, 64-bit, big Indian, little Indian dwarf reader. So it can now read all of dwarf, and you can say, I want you to have access to symbol foo. And now it knows, because I had written previously peek and poke to be able to map from virtual space to C++ space. Now I added the layer of dwarf, so now you can do it symbolically.
Wow, okay. So it can load binaries, basically.
I can load binaries and do things. One of the initial items I wrote this for, and you'll like this, Mathieu, for say you're in a video game before it got big and has a little bit of a footprint, but say we scale this Trix back down. It's one of my original design goals was a resident monitor that would live within a game or any program I'm in, and suddenly, oh gosh, part of the program wedged. I'm never going to be able to reproduce it. So you fire up this little REMPL scripting language that has access to the C++ memory, and I could write, my own little, oh geez, the memory I know is structured like this. Let me take a look at that and dump it out. Oh, by the way, Trix also supports records and tagged types and all sorts of things like that. So
nice.
No, I was just thinking, I still think the question of what is a good scripting language to marry with C++ is, I would argue, still an open problem, because else game studios would not stop trying to reinvent everything all the time. I know Lua is a big one. I tried to contribute to an open source project. It didn't pan out super great, but they were using JavaScript, which, unsurprisingly, a lot of their VM time was spent, a lot of their logic was spent in running in script. I know different. I think I don't know how blueprints in Unreal are compiling to anything. On Unity, obviously, we use C# that is then transpiled to C++, or that is run through Mono, depending on your platform. I think it's still we're still trying to figure out what is the good way to have a scripting language that runs fast enough. I looked up at Trix. I think the syntax I don't know, because the main issue usually is that you want, the reason you have a scripting language, well, that's twofold. The first one is you want something that's fast to iterate, so ideally no edit, compile, and restart time. Depending on your engine and platform, the compile or the restart time might be the issue. Some games restart fast, some games takes 10 minutes, well, not 10 minutes, but a couple of minutes to load. I don't know how long it takes to link, but it can be an issue. And the other one is usually the people who script are not programmers by trade. They need to, and maybe it's kind of an unsolvable problem, because you're asking non-programmers to write efficient script. that's gonna run fast. So maybe it is just by nature the wrong question to ask. But I think there is still like a search for how do we give those people something that is easy enough to understand if you don't have a CS background, and also you're not gonna make it run like like 10 FPS.
I think it's a solvable problem, and you're absolutely right. The syntax of tricks is not for the faint of heart, and I acknowledge that unapologetically. So one of the things is it was an exploration tool, but I do think it has value, and I hope some people look at it and use it. I did make it Apache 2.0. Use it for whatever you want. Just give, if you use it somewhere, I'd like a thank you somewhere. But it it solved a lot of problems, and there was a lot of it could be a launching pad for me if I were to try and make a more palatable scripting language, because there was a lot of problems that I had to solve mentally on to do the items I wanted. And some of that ended up making some of the syntax that's not for the faint of heart. It's not as bad as APL, if any of you kids know what APL was.
I heard
But
of it.
they used to have to be dedicated terminals to be able to use APL,
Yeah.
and the characters would overstrike. It was really rough. So it has to be, it has prefixes and suffixes to be able to do things, to be able to manage the memory when I'm allocating an object. If it goes into the save restore journal heap, or does it go into the general purpose malloc garbage collected heap? So you have the ability at any time to define if something's read-only, what memory store it goes into. That's incredibly powerful, but it comes at a cost of some syntax that might make you go, So, and Jason, you and your cousin and I talked 5 years ago about suffixes, and that was for this, to be able to do things. So, and it's shipped in this, some of this. So it's a solvable thing. Are you familiar with the scripting language? I think it's Naughty Dog did, called Gold, Gold. That was what all their games were written in by, and I think it was a Lisp derivative scripting. Again, rapid iteration, interactive, writing it as they're doing it. Might not be the most performant, but it was pretty darn good. I've never worked in it, but I've read about it. And it compiled down to assembly, so it did a JIT type thing. I think it was Naughty Dog. It was one of those companies.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair we're not, well, how do I want to say this? We're not talking about the days of needing to hit 120 FPS or something like that, but you already just mentioned that you've got an Inform interpreter.
Yeah.
And Inform is possibly the earliest example of a scripting engine for writing games, right? And then that inspired, I believe, at least indirectly, the scripting system that Sierra used in their AGS and SCI engines. And they had an incredibly successful company. They could write their games in the scripting engine and then easily port it to like 14 different platforms, right? So maybe it is a solved problem, but maybe it's not yet a solved problem when you care about writing a scripting language for a first-person shooter, perhaps.
So that's an interesting point, and it's actually fascinating to me why Infocom and some of the other stuff was one of the natural first programs I wrote my scripting languages. The only reason why I ever got into computers was in 76, 77. I got access to a bank mainframe and played Adventure, and I wanted to discover how the heck this thing worked. And I taught myself programming and then got into computers. And I always had a dream, because I loved Infocom games. Wouldn't it be great to work at Infocom? Lo and behold, I went to work for Activision and helped write the engine for Return to Zork, which was,
oh, nice.
It's got the name Infocom on it. It's not really an Infocom texture game, but whatever. It was close enough. But there was a article in IEEE Computing about put a dungeon on your desktop, which was written by the founders of Infocom. The Z machine was one of the earliest examples of a virtual machine that Java inherited that technology from. It is a virtual machine in every sense of the word, like the modern thing, that they wrote as a domain-specific thing to port their 1 megabyte ZIL, which was a Lisp-like language at MIT, down to a 32K personal computer. It was one of the most elegant solutions ever. And and then that's what became the Z machine that on all the home computers, and that's what I ended up implementing a version of that Z machine in the Trix language. So they chose a Lisp type derivative for their language. When we did Return to Zork, we did an object-oriented Lisp language as well. So it's kind of, there have been many scripting systems that use, or programs that use a scripting system, and a lot of them have ended up being Lisp or Scheme or something like that because it's so essentially easy to implement. It might not be the easiest to program in or digest, but it is straightforward to implement in as an embedded scripting language.
In a small,
In a small footprint,
and easy to parse too.
Very.
Yeah, that was the point of one of the keynotes at ICCU, I believe, right? That like to implement the Lisp, you have to implement like, how is it, like 7 or 10 like base functions, and you're kind of done.
Everything else
so
can be
Jason, I got jealous of your const expr scheme. So in Trix, I implemented a mini scheme with call and CC and all of that as well. So.
Yeah, that was, I mean, you said that your language isn't yet ready for release, but, I did release 1.0.
It is released. I just haven't called it 1.0 because I want peer feedback, but it's ready to call it 1.0. It is production quality. Those showcase programs are real. They're not one-line things. They're 9,000 lines of doing things. Yeah.
That's a lot. We should wrap up the episode. I don't know if any closing thoughts from anyone.
I had a stupid question. You mentioned PostScript several times. Is that the thing about printers, or am I confusing that with something?
No, you're not confusing it. So PostScript is a imaging language, but it has a full Turing complete programming language lurking under it.
Oh.
Strip out all of the operators that stroke a path or fill a path. You have a full compute, engine under there with, data and control structures. I took that and then ran with it into a modern kind of view. So again, sales pitch, read the README if you're interested. Also there's 60, 80 documents on implementation details and description of the language. So it's well documented, well tested, things like that. Good examples. It's a fun thing. Again, everyone should write a passion project because that's how you learn and evolve.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You give me some ideas. I'm giving a talk at NDC Oslo, actually, not Oslo. Well, kind of Oslo, but Tech Town. And it's about how I learn graphics programming. But I wanted to rewrite it because I was not happy with the first rendition that I've done at a meetup. I kind of started because of like, I've done some graphics, but I kind of had no idea what I was doing. I want to catch up.
Right.
And I had time between clients. I just decided to write my own rendering engine. And
you should have written it in PostScript.
People in interviews. Yeah.
There's a little Raycast demo in the demos program as well, doing it all with ASCII characters. So I got a question for you guys. Are you at your work desk? And if so, what books do you have on it? What books are at hand right now?
I literally got rid of all of my books.
Okay, so my answer is I only have one book that is close to me, and it's the paperweight that's holding my projector so it can project on top of my PC, and that is Large-Scale C++ Software Design by John Lakos, because I don't know if I have his blessing to use it as a paperweight now, but I know it's a book written in the 90s. I bought it after I met John because I was really interested in all his talks about how you should structure a C++ project. I read it. I realized that it makes stuff like, you should use classes to emulate namespace. And I was like, that's a book written from the 90s. So it's been used as a paperweight since. That's the one C++ book I have close by. Sorry, John. I still like your work.
So here's what I have hanging around because you can see what I've been working on.
Oh, there you
My
go.
prologue book, my small talk book. And here's a book, if no one's discovered this came out 10 years ago. This is one of the greatest books on domain specific I've ever run into.
So it's
Mazes for Programmers.
Yeah.
This thing is amazing. Ha.
I did make a note to make sure that was in the list because I knew that you told me that it inspired your examples. And just a quick aside, Mathieu, I first became aware of the fact that PostScript was a Turing complete language probably late 90s, because I remember that there was a PostScript file that had gone around that every time you printed it, it would print a different maze.
Right.
Oh, yeah, makes sense. I remember the main reason I know about PostScript is because when you were buying a printer in the early 2000s, you had to check. Like every nerd on Linux told me, if it has a PostScript interpreter, then it doesn't matter what driver you have. You don't have to fight like CPL drivers on Windows or whatnot. Just plug it on your network and you're done. So I always remember that. I have a printer somewhere that I've been in a box for like 8 years since I moved because I don't need to print anything. But yeah, that's how I remember it. But that makes sense. It's a programming language. You could actually use it to print something different each time.
Yep.
Sorry, I was just trying to think. I was already going in my head like, but you need a random seed. But I guess maybe you can.
It has PostScript has a random number service in it built in.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for coming on, Mark. This has been awesome.
Yeah, of course. Well, as usual, right? We do not have a sponsor, but we are always looking for new guests to come and join us. We have a short list of people we would like to interview, but it's always nice to have more people who want to come and talk us about their hobby, their hot takes about C++, and anything related. We're always happy to talk to you. And as we mentioned earlier, you can find us on YouTube and your favorite podcast API. We are fixing the fact that they don't always release at the same time. I think that's about it. So with that said, I guess see you next month.
See you next month.